This is The Art of Plenty. I'm Amy McKenna. Welcome. Let's get into it. Let's get into the question of how much is good enough costing you? Now, what am I even talking about? What am I even saying when I say good enough? I'm talking about those things that hold us into situations, into places because they're not perfect. They're not exactly what we want. They're not where we thought we would be, but it's good enough. In a work environment, these are sometimes known as those golden handcuffs. You know, those things, that really good pay, or the fact that you have pension or benefits or incredible holidays. Those parts of the job that took you time and energy and effort to earn. You've been investing in that, and that's a payoff. And even though the job isn't amazing, those things make it weighted in such a way that you're willing to stay in a place that you don't love, or with a boss that you don't see eye to eye about, or your value alignment isn't quite right, because it's good enough. It kind of pushes up the goodness part of the job because there are all these incredible perks. But what is it really costing you? What is it really costing you to stay in a job that is simply good enough? Because here's the deal. When everything sucks, it's super easy to have the motivation to get out of a job. Or if you're in a situation with a friendship and there's some things that are kind of rubbing you the wrong way with your friend, but for the most part, the relationship is great and you just don't want to ruffle feathers. So you don't change anything because it's good enough. We all know that when it's really bad, you can't help but find a way to create change or to put pressure on the situation. But it's harder to do that when there are a lot of good things that are going on. Now, we've all heard those cliche statements. Well, if you were to die tomorrow, would you regret the decisions that you've made in your life? And I mean, it's a cliche, right? How do we make a judgment on our life thinking about the possibility of how we would feel about it if we knew that our time was coming to an end? But I think that there's an opportunity to really take stock in our life. And even if we can't take that question seriously about, would I have regrets if I knew my life was ending tomorrow, or if I knew that there was something coming that was going to drastically change my life in a negative way or in a difficult way, like getting ill, would I feel different? Would I feel different about the life that I'm living today, knowing that things were going to drastically change, or that I wasn't going to have the same opportunities, or that my life were going to come to an end? How would you feel about the decisions that you're making? So while you're listening, I just want you to take quick stock on your life. I want you to think about the things that you say or the things that you know are most important to you. Now, I want you to think about it in a more general way. So when I break down the things for myself that are super important to me, the things that really matter to me, I have elements such as my relationships. And it's not just my relationships. When I think of relationships, I'm not just thinking about my relationship with my husband, Jody, or with my kids, but also my relationships with friends and families. So that's one area. Then there is my work, which is another area. Another area is my well-being and my health. And another area is my hobbies and my passions. And then the final area that I like to think about is in my spirituality. So of these 5 areas, do you feel satisfied? How do you actually feel about those areas? Are those things that when you think about them, you'd be like, yeah, I'm like pretty satisfied. My work is good enough. My health is good enough. I have a fair amount of time to my hobbies. I feel like it's good. It's okay. My relationships, yeah, they're decent. If you're answering this questions when you think about these areas and you're kind of in the middle of the board in terms of how you feel about it, I want to ask you, how much does it cost you? How much does it cost you in the relationship realm to just have relationships that are good enough? Because what would happen if you started investing energy, if you started investing time into those relationships? What would be the impact into your life? Or if you started working more on your well-being, on your physical health and your emotional health, what would the impact be to your relationships if you were in a better place mentally and emotionally? Or if you started to focus on your spiritual life, what would the repercussions be for your work? Because we know all of these things are integrated. We know that how we feel in our personal life impacts how we operate at work. And we know that how we feel at work impacts our relationships and how our physical health is and how our mental health is. Like all of these pieces are connected. We don't separate them. So what would happen if in one of those areas of your life you started directing energy toward that, even if it's already good, and you started to invest time to kind of shift it out of good enough into something that was great? If you're not sure how to do that, if that sounds good to you, if it sounds good to you to think about these things and think, yeah, Amy, I'm with you. I really want to see a shift in my personal life. I want to see a shift in my work life, but you don't know what the next step is. I have a great next step for you. We have this incredible course right now offered through Stillwater Online called The Integrated Life. It's all about being happier. It's all about being more authentic. And it's about having work that you enjoy. So if you need your work life to shift out of good enough, I highly recommend coming and checking out the course, The Integrated Life, and you can find the link in the show notes. We offer it in synchronous and asynchronous, and our next synchronous option is starting in May. And it is a fabulous way to shift yourself out of the good enough. The good enough life kind of reminds me of a Netflix binge. It's super easy to settle into, and time just goes by. You don't even realize it. There's another hour gone. There is another evening gone. And it's comfortable. It's easy. It's predictable. And you don't have to feel bad about it. I mean, it's not like you just go binge on Netflix all day. Not when you're an adult and you have a family, right? So you've probably already put in a big work day, whether it's a family work day and it's the weekend and you guys are doing lots of stuff to take care of your family, or you've been at work all day. You don't feel bad if you watch some TV in the evening. But don't you find it easy to wonder, where did all that time go? How are there these people out there in the world that are absolutely crushing it at life? And It's because those people that are out there crushing it at life probably don't binge on Netflix. But even more than that, it's not that they don't binge on Netflix as much as it is that they don't take good enough as good enough. They don't accept good enough in that area of their life that they're excelling at. What would change for you? What would change in your life if you started to push yourself? If you said, I'm going to focus on my relationship with my kids. And yeah, our relationship is good enough. We talk to each other. We're not fighting too much. But what if you said, you know what? For the next couple of weeks, for the next month, I'm not having a relationship with this child anymore that's good enough. I'm going to have a relationship with this child that is better than good enough. It reminds me of Gretchen Rubin's book, The Happiness Project. I don't know if you've read it. I loved this book. And here is a part that stood out for me. Gretchen is talking to her husband, and she's telling him that she's going to deep dive into happiness. And she is going to do some investigating into what happiness is, and she's going to make a change, and she's going to make her life happier. And her husband, I can just envision his face. I mean, I do not know them, but when I was reading this part of the book, I felt like I was a part of their life. Isn't that just what you love about books? You can just find yourself in them. And I think that the reason why it resonated with me is because I could envision myself having the exact same conversation with my own husband. That's probably why I could picture this perplexed look on his face. And he says to her, well, aren't you happy? Like, am I missing something here? And her response to him is so classic for myself. I would totally have responded that way. She says, yeah, of course I'm happy. I just thought that wouldn't it be great if I could be more happy, if I could be happier. And this is what launches her on this incredible journey to increase her happiness. Her happiness level was good enough. By any typical standard, she was happy. And she decided to push the envelope. She decided to deep dive into happiness to see if she could get a little bit more happy in her life. And if you've read her book, she chronicles what happened to her over the course of the year while she was implementing these different strategies. I find it so inspiring because here is an example of a woman who has decided that good enough is not going to be good enough when it comes to her happiness, when it comes to her well-being and her emotional state. She's on this mission to have an abundance of happiness. And that's what this episode today is all about. Is there a part of your life that you could push the envelope a little bit more, that you could deep dive into to get more out of it? When do we decide that good enough isn't acceptable? Where's the tipping point? I have this friend that we've been friends since high school, and I love him. He's an amazing guy. And wouldn't you know it, for the last 20 years, 20 plus, since he's been in high school, he's been doing the same workout. Don't you think that's amazing? Like, talk about commitment. Every week he works out and he does the same workout. He's been doing this for over 20 years. And I love it. I love that he is that consistent. He doesn't take time off, with the exception when he goes away for holidays for a week or two. But other than that, he has been faithful to be at the gym every week, couple times a week, doing the same workout. Now, first of all, there is not even an ounce of judgment in relation to the fact that he's doing that, because just his sheer commitment to working out is so far beyond good enough that I'm by no means slighting the commitment that he's made. I mean, talk about consistency and persistence. Unbelievable. And yet, it's the same workout. His workout has been good enough for him. So, at what point do we decide that we're not going to settle for good enough? Is there a tipping point? And for him, with his workouts, there hasn't been. They're still good enough, and he's satisfied with that. Now, that's not to say that he's doing that in other areas of his life where he's just kind of keeping that middle of the road tempo. And there is some wonderful aspects about not pushing yourself in every area, because it's a lot. It is a lot to be working on your relationship and be improving your life in terms of your physical health and your emotional well-being. I'm one of those people that I can go way in overboard, and then I find that I'm doing way too many things in way too many areas of my life where I'm trying to improve and make things better. So there's something to be said of creating change in sustainable ways and focusing on certain things at a certain time rather than just trying to make everything better. So there's something to be said for that. But when we push ourselves, when we try to move certain areas out of the good enough, what's amazing is that it has this ripple effect on our life. So just as I was saying that you don't have to work on every area at once, what happens when you level up in your relationships is that all of a sudden it becomes easier to level up in your work. And then when you do that, it becomes easier again to level up in your personal health or your physical well-being, because everything is connected, everything is integrated. So when you start having success in one area, it starts to have an overflow or ripple effect into another area of your life. I mean, isn't that incredible? And the impact is even exponentially greater, because when you level up, it inspires other people that are around you to also level up. Have you been in a situation or been in a relationship where you see somebody who starts crushing it at something and you're like, oh, is that what we do now? Oh, okay, let's go. I'm here for it. And you start leveling up. I've noticed this many times over the course of my relationship with Jody. When he starts getting really gung-ho on working out, I'm like, okay. I start getting inspired and I start working out more and start looking for ways that I can challenge myself in that way. It just feeds each other. Like, it just goes back and forth, and it's so encouraging. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're meant to be in relationships with one another, is because it helps us to up the ante. And if you don't have anyone in your life that's doing that for you, good news. You can be that person that does that for your friend group, that does that for your family. And when you do that, there will probably be a ripple effect that comes back your way, or you'll find other people who are doing that and encouraging you. We have so much more capacity to make change. We have so much opportunity to level up. The tricky thing about asking that question, how much is good enough costing you, is that the things that increase in our life when we focus on improving our relationships, or we move towards a job that is more rewarding or more fulfilling, the benefits that we get are not measurable in the same way that a pension is measurable, in the same way that benefits or holiday time is measurable. Because when we up the ante, when we work at improving our life in these areas, the things that improve are things like joy, things like peace, things like love. They're these intangible aspects of life that make life so beautiful, but they don't necessarily have a measure. They don't have a weight. But we sure feel them. We sure experience a richer life when we have more joy, when we have more peace, when we have more love. And I want to encourage you that if you know that your work is good enough, but you also know that there's so much more out there for you, I want you to know that if your work is good enough, but you know that there's so much more out there, you don't have to switch careers to get that so much more, because those golden handcuffs are a real deal. And you might not be ready to make that type of transition where you're giving all of that up, but there are ways to take your good enough job to an even better job. And that's what our course, The Integrated Life, is all about. So please go to the show notes if this is speaking to you, because we would love to see you in that course. Because our lives are meant to be richer. They're meant to be fuller than good enough. Now, there are two things that I want to tell you about before we end tonight. The first thing is, if this is the type of content that speaks to you, if you are enjoying listening in to these podcasts, I want to encourage you to sign up for the email list so that you can get this type of content into your inbox, so you know when new episodes are coming out. But even more than that, our emails are our opportunity for us, for the team, for me, to expand some of the thoughts that we don't necessarily get to in the podcast. So if this is speaking to you, it's a great way to have even more of this type of content coming into your life and encouraging you. It also is a great place to get new release information about our courses and promos related to our courses. This has been The Art of Plenty. My name is Amy McInnes, and I'm so glad that you joined us, that you gave up, that you invested some of your time into listening to me share the things that have been on my heart, those things that I've been thinking about. It is an honor that you would invite me in. So thank you for that. This episode created is for entertainment purposes only. It is not to be construed as professional advice. And I look forward to connecting with you next time.